All right. So again, welcome everyone to our summer learning series, Pioneers of Equity. My name is Taralyn. I go by T, she, her pronouns, and I'm a program manager here at Promise Venture Studio. And we are really just so excited and honored to kick off our three-part summer learning series. The focus of this series is really to hold space and create room to really uplift BIPOC voices in early childhood research, and also create a forum for us to not only engage with those voices, engage with those stories, engage with those research, but also to dream and ideate around a way forward with the work that our wonderful speakers have done and our wonderful leaders have done. And so in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Erasma, who is going to introduce Dr. Nicole Cummings, who we are just so grateful to have in this space. And over the course of our time together, we're going to hear a little bit about her journey, about her work, and then have some time together to, again, do some of that dreaming and ideating around a way forward using Dr. Cummings' work as a foundation. And so with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Erasma, who is going to introduce our guest for today.
Thank you, T. Thank you so much for centering us in this space. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, everyone. My name is Erasma Beras Montecholo, pronouns she, ella. I am a senior advisor here at Promise, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this special fireside chat with my friend, colleague, and transformational leader, Dr. Nicole Cummings-Lewis. Dr. Cummings-Lewis has over 15 years of experience in early childhood education, organizational change, and nonprofit leadership. She holds degrees in early childhood education, elementary education, and a doctorate in education in learning and organizational change. She is deeply, deeply committed to systemic change, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. She serves as a senior manager of Coalition Community Voice at United Way for Greater Austin and is the founder of Beyond My Destiny Consulting. Dr. Cummings-Lewis focuses on strategic planning, community engagement, and developing restorative, equitable environments for children and families. She is a passionate advocate for early childhood education and community empowerment. Dr. Cummings-Lewis is also a distinguished scholar, and today we will delve into her study, Unlocking the Early Impact, a multiple case study on the underrepresentation of Black men as early childhood educators. And through her research, Dr. Cummings-Lewis has provided invaluable insights into the challenges as well as the triumphs of Black male educators in Central Texas, employing methodologies that include one-on-one interviews, focus groups, and mentorship questionnaires. So, Nicole, welcome to the space.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, y'all. I'm really excited to talk about this. I could talk about this all day long. So when I was asked, I said absolutely. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you. We're so grateful to have you. But before we start our fireside chat, I would love to invite you to spend a few minutes walking us through like your work and your research and its impact on shaping more inclusive and equitable educational landscapes.
Yeah, so this journey for me has really been it's been my life's journey. And I'll talk a little bit more about the connection as well a little bit later through some questions that Erasma will ask me and then some of the research. But really, I really wanted to edify and elevate the voices of folks in my Black community in the educational system. I did not have a positive experience as a child, and I've mentored, walked with, have a child who has not necessarily had a positive experience in the educational world. And so being in education really caused me to open my eyes to the systems that are broken and not necessarily built for children like me or people who have brains the way that I have a brain. And so a part of this research really it allowed me to really dig deep into the stories of others. I really believe in the power of stories. And so that was such a pivotal thing for me. I wanted to make sure that I was elevating the story of the people who were on the ground doing the work so that we weren't just looking at statistics. And I think so often as researchers, we're looking at the data, which is great and we need the data, but sometimes we take the humanity out of the data. And I really wanted to bring the humanity back into this work through my research.
That is absolutely fabulous. And I what you're saying resonates with me from my own experience. And also, one of the reasons why we made the shift, like my family and I made the shift from, the US to the Dominican Republic is exactly what this, I think, what your work and the insights and the findings from your work really highlight the importance of feeling represented, of celebrating culture, of Black male joy and happiness. And so, Nicole, I would love to invite you to, share some of your work here. Like, do you have a PowerPoint that you would like to share and walk us through it?
Yes, I'm gonna share my screen. Let me see if I can get it set up. And then I'll just really gonna walk you through the high points of what my research was, the findings, the foundation of the literature. I'm gonna do this as I'm talking to you all as well. Let's see. Do you all see my screen? Do y'all see the presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. And then I would love to just for us to have a conversation around it. And please, y'all can stop me if you need to ask a question in the chat. I really want this to be conversational and interactive as well. So I'm going to jump into the content. As you can see, Unlocking the Early Impact, a multiple case study on the underrepresentation of Black men as early childhood educators. The goal was to explore their career choice, retention, their sustainability, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. I had a little pushback from my advisor around the word sustainability, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And so, is it advancing? I'm not going to read all of this word for word because you all can read. But basically, this was like my problem statement as a part of the literature review. We looked at data that really talks about how there isn't a lot of Black men in the early childhood. Right here. And there's really only 2%.
Waiting for you to come up here to make sure you don't need nothing.
Sorry about that. Got it.
You're good. Okay, so there's only 2% of men reported in the K through 12 sector who are Black males. And there's even less reported when you look at the early childhood sector. And so that's early learning centers, home centers, things of that sort. And so there's even less reported there. And it was really important for me to hone in on that. There's been a lot of reports as of late around this 2%. And I really wanted to dig into what that really meant as a part of this research. Let me know. And so the purpose statement was, the purposes of the qualitative multiple case study was to explore the Black male early childhood educators' career choice, retention, sustainability, and perceived impacts that they had on students in Central Texas. It became perceived impact because when I was doing my study, we were in the height of the COVID, sorry, y'all. And what happened was I was denied access into schools because of COVID and them not really knowing what was happening at that time. And so my question originally was going to be also digging into the lived experience of the students that these educators were educating at the time. But because I was denied access, I did switch, and I transparently talk about that as a part of my process, into just the perceived impact. And that's through secondhand stories that these participants communicated to me. Here are the research questions. According to Black men who've remained in early education, what experiences have influenced their career choices and sustainability, along with retention? And then according to Black male educators, what influences do they experience and how do they perceive their impact on Black students again? So here, the theoretical framework that I investigated was transformational leadership. This was a vital theory for me because what I really wanted to know and understand was, how do we perceive these Black men in our world and in our educational system, not just as teachers, but as leaders of their students who are building leaders for tomorrow. And so the transformational leadership theory framework really worked for me. It is from Burns. It comes from, I think 1978 is when the establishment of this framework was established, but then there were different ideations of it in 2013 and 2002 as well. But there are 4 different components to this. It's idealized influence, inspirational motivation, individualized consideration, and intellectual stimulation. And what I did was I looked at these components through the lens of Black men who see themselves as leaders, regardless of what society deems them to be, regardless of stereotypes, regardless of what the media says Black men are in our community. Through their lens, what leadership values do they hold, and what leadership elements are they transferring to their students? And so that's why this framework, I feel, fit really well with my study. And a lot of things came about through that, and we'll see a little bit more of that when I get to the implications. The methodology was qualitative. It was a multiple case study. I did several elements of data collection, as Esma talked about earlier, which was reflective journals, data entries, one-on-one interviews. I also did an educational biography to get insight into their early childhood experiences, so that I wasn't just navigating this research through what they're experiencing now, but that it would be linked to their childhood as well. And then the multiple case study, for those of you who don't know, it just means that I isolated my content and my research around understanding deeply 3 individual cases, and we'll talk more about those participants. And so here's an overview of the findings. They became ECE educators after pursuing other career paths. They participated and felt, the participants felt undervalued, and underpaid, and that came out a bunch. Participants desired community, mentorship, relied on self-care strategies. They valued being authentic. For their students, it was very important for them to be authentically themselves. They believed there was a need to lean into the power of their Black identities, which we'll talk a little bit more about Black joy and Black embodiment that came through here. And then they leveraged different engagement strategies to pass on that elements of legacy and hope and leadership to their students. And on these next 2 pages, I'm just gonna sit in silence for just a few so that you can read a couple of quotes that came out around each one of these big key findings, which is career choice, retention, sustainability, authenticity, Black embodiment, and influence recycled. I'm gonna give you a moment to just read some of the quotes. Can y'all see that? I know it's kind of tiny.
We can. Nicole, just one question that came in through the chat that I want to share is, were all of the cases based in Texas?
Yes, for this study, all of them were in Texas. Once you have looked at those, let me know, just give me a thumbs up and I can move on to the next 3 key findings. As I said, I believe in the power of stories. And so I really wanted to pull out their perspectives on these findings. I mean, I couldn't have found them without them. So it really came through their perspectives. Now for me to go to the next page, or yes, I'm looking. I'm gonna click over, and I'm okay to share this with others towards the end. So once people desire to read more into them. So as I said, these quotes came directly from the participants. It was really a privilege to hear and understand their stories deeply. I did about a 2-hour interview with each of them individually, and then I did a focus group with all three of them together. Then I did journal entries. They got 3 different journal prompts, the educational biography, and a mentorship interview. So I really got to deeply know and understand their perspectives, deeply know and understand their desires and where they were coming from. And I really hope that that came out in the bulk of the findings, and to be a voice for them to finding systems and agents of change moving forward in our early childhood educational system. So here were some of the implications, and recommendations. They are not all here. There's many of them, but these are a few that I pulled out for today. It just highlighted the need for potential transformative approach, and a greater acceptance of Black men in schools and early childhood communities through innovation. And that's the key, like through innovation. For so long, we've been doing it a specific way. Actually, in the 1800s, there were about 50% of educators were Black because of the times. And so just thinking about the decrease in that today, to encourage school administrators, educational leaders, organizations that support educators in their recruitment strategies, in their retention and development. They talked so much about once they were on a campus, not feeling like they belonged, not feeling accommodated, to feeling like they were just tossed children because of their Blackness, but not really being represented, or their voices heard on campus. For educational preparational programs to think innovatively about how they are bringing folks in. We have so many Black athletes on campuses. We have so many colleges that have folks who are willing and ready to serve our community. And I think that education gets a bad rep in our society, as just something to do when you don't have anything else to do. I don't think any of y'all in this room feel that way. But unfortunately, I know lots of people who have gone into education because they needed a backup. And I think that is, there needs to be intentionality around how we frame education in our country. And that goes into policy, that goes into initiatives that promote access for folks, to recognize that education is a pivotal point for moving our society forward. So these are just a few that I pulled out. There's so many more that are directed specifically towards each one of these groups, stakeholder groups, but these are just a few that I pulled out here. And that's really all that I have. I have a slide that I can put back up to connect. But as far as the content, that's really all that I have. I would love to just dig deeper into any questions that y'all may have, and then questions that I've asked myself. Thanks for listening to an overview of this.
Nicole, thank you so much for walking us through your work. You know, there's so many different things that stand out for me. And one of those things that I really appreciate and value of, you know, your study is that it is grounded in transformational leadership theory and how it seeks to really highlight how Black male educators can serve as transformative leaders within the educational settings, and really positively affecting their students' lives. Like I see that in your research, and that to me is so incredibly powerful. And so I'm gonna kick us off just asking a few questions, and then I will open it up to all of our community to share some questions that they may have with Nicole. But I just want to kick us off by asking Nicole, and you started to talk a little bit about this before you began your presentation, but wondering if you can go a little deeper and share with us, like, what inspired you to choose this particular research focus?
Yeah, that's such a layered question, but I will try to condense it. There are several things. So as I mentioned before, well, I'll start from like my educational journey. I struggled in school as a little Black girl in Austin with no Black teachers. I had none throughout my entire experience from kinder all the way up to, or pre-K actually, all the way up into high school. There was a few Black teachers on my high school campus, but I was never in their classes. And I struggled to connect with my teachers. My home was my safe haven. I got everything that I needed there, culturally encouraged, developed there, but at school is depleted me. It was a energy drainer, school was. And so that was like my first motivation for talking about early childhood as a foundation for the experiences that students have, and it being an influence on who a child becomes in their adulthood, the confidence that they have in their adulthood, the things that they believe about their self in adulthood. That's where that piece started for me of why early childhood education. And the piece around studying Black men in early childhood education came because as an early childhood educator, I was the teacher that was always, little Black boys were always transferred into my class. Every year, there wasn't a year where there weren't 2 or 3 Black boys transferred into my classroom because they needed additional support. And there were no Black men on campus to take on that support. It was me. And so they were looking to me to support these Black boys, which I loved and endured, but I saw that there was something missing for them. They connected to me, loved it. I am still connected to many of their families today. And actually the names of the participants, Caden, Darren, and Amari, those are pseudonyms for little Black boys that were in my classrooms. So it was great. And I knew that there was something that I couldn't give them because they couldn't fully see themselves in me, if that makes sense. Additionally, I have a little Black boy who has struggled through his educational journey. We found out he was on the spectrum when he was 5. He's in the 4th grade now, but it has been rough with his educators, with his teachers, connecting with him. And so I really feel like I wanted to fully understand those who were in this field, why they were here, what was calling them in. Is it something that we can replicate and duplicate? Why are they leaving if they're choosing to leave? I really wanted to understand their perspectives because I really believe that adding them into the mix for Black and brown students, Black girls and Black boys alike, would be beneficial to children like myself. Even if I didn't have a female Black teacher, I think just having a Black teacher at all would have done so much for my confidence that I didn't get in the classroom setting. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that and for your vulnerability. Yeah, as I mentioned before, that really resonates with me personally. And also, when thinking about my children, raising 2 boys and raising them in a city and a school system where they didn't see themselves. They didn't have male teachers necessarily. They didn't have teachers that, understood our culture and our history. And now that they're in a different setting, like how different, or I don't want to say different because they're still my boys, but just how comfortable they are with accessing their own identity and accessing that pride in their culture and their language and who they are. And so I can totally understand the desire to make sure that we're creating equitable system where all children have that, right? Where they feel represented, where they feel valued, where they feel supported. So, thank you so much for sharing that.
The other
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
As an administrator, I was intentional about recruiting Black men and brown men on our campus. And so everywhere I would go in the city, I'd be like, hey, are you in education? You're not, let's figure this out. You can be a partner teacher on our campus and we can work you up. So like when I was an administrator, I made sure that we had Black and brown men on our campus for our Black and brown students as soon as I got the authority to have any say so in who we were hiring, because we had so many on our campus that just needed love and support. And it was important to me to not be the person that kids needed to find the safe haven in all the time, but to have somebody that they could look who also looks like them.
Yeah.
So that was vital for me.
Yeah, I love that. You're tapping into, you know, your power to be able to bring others into the space, and be responsive to the needs of the children that you were educating. Nicole, as you know, we've talked about this a bunch, is that I'm a big proponent of like asset framing, which very much aligns with the movement of Black male joy, right? Where we affirm the experience of joy and happiness among Black men and boys, basically as a counter narrative to, you know, the often predominant focus on the struggles, the pain, and the adversity faced by Black men in society. So how do you define Black male joy within the context of your research on Black male early childhood educators, and why is it an important aspect to explore further?
Yeah, so thanks for asking this question. In my research, you're going to see the word joy, but you don't see it super often unless a participant is talking about it. What I really found was it was around Black embodiment and the confidence that they had to embrace their Blackness and to share that with their students. And so that's where, in the context of this research, the Black male joy came through these Black male participants getting invigorated, showing happiness, and seeing their children's faces and their eyes perk up when they walked into the room, or when they saw them across the school, or seeing other Black students across the school that weren't in their classroom, and students running to them and knowing their name. And so that's where this element of Black male joy came in the context of this research. And the participants used words like, it gives me privilege to have impact on my students. It gives me a privilege to be a mirror image, to give students a voice of confidence. And you could literally see their faces and the joy illuminating when they were telling stories of empowerment like this around their students and experiences with their students, and even with their students' families. And so that's where, for me, in the context of this research, the Black male joy comes from them experiencing their ability to give something to their students, and then receiving that reciprocal energy back from them. And so that was, you saw one of the findings was the Black embodiment, and that really encapsulates the ability to boost confidence, the ability to be an exemplar, the ability to be of some importance in a student's life, and then have the students then communicate that back to them.
Yeah, no, I really love that. I mean, I think it highlights the importance of that, you know, the social emotional connection between, you know, an educator and their student, especially when the educator is like representative of the child, right? That emotional connection can reap so many rewards, and it's bi-directional,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is incredible.
Yeah, it definitely took both of them.
Yeah. You know, in your research, you identified like various challenges faced by Black educators, right, in early childhood settings. Which of these challenges, and it could be more than one, but do you find is like more pervasive? And what systemic like changes do you believe are necessary to address them?
Yeah, so what I'm thinking about is their lack of feeling belonging and community. They didn't feel at home. So as much as they desired to be there and to be present, and they felt like their role was a calling, they didn't feel like they belonged in the spaces. As we know, education is a female dominant community. And so then being a Black male in those spaces where you are facing microaggressions, or facing the inability to move up because of perceived, like, why can't I think of the word? Perceived tracks that you should be on. So Black male, you should be a coach, versus this early childhood teacher. Those were the things that really caused them, that all boiled down to belonging, really, for them. As they were talking it through, they named things like microaggressions, named things like not being paid, not being valued, and it all kind of coupled under not really feeling like they belonged. And that also in turn then linked to the sustainability of the environment. And that's where I was talking about earlier. I had to fight for the definition of sustainability defined by these Black males. For them, it wasn't about can I show up and do my work? It was about, does the environment create an atmosphere where I desire to show up and do my work?
So yeah, thank you for that. So those that have been in the early childhood space and continue to stay there, like, what are they tapping into, right? Other than their own, you know, self-determination and their own power. What else exists that just motivates them to continue to engage as educators in this space? Are they finding communities or are they not? Are they finding each other?
So they all said they had to find community outside of their school setting. And so it would be like informal communities that they found. As far as inside of the school, what they communicated was around their students. Seeing their students was a motivator to them wanting to stay. Getting in connection with remaining connection with their students' families was a motivator to allowing them to stay, and recognizing that it was beyond them in that moment. And they had some friends, they were able to give me secondhand stories about peers that they had who didn't have connections with their students. And so they were like, I'm not here for my students. This isn't the spot for me. I've got to go. But one of the other things that was common in all three of these participants was each one of them had some sort of connection to the early childhood field as a child that caused them to look back towards what they believed their calling was, that helped sustain them as well. And it was interesting, and it came about in different ways for them. One was like he played teacher growing up in the neighborhood, he was bossing people around. Another was he had an educator in church setting, not at school, who really had a huge impact on him and spoke volumes into him. And so that caused him to desire to be like that male teacher in a Sunday school setting. And then the other one was through actually their own child's experience. Like they wanted to provide for their child. And so they ended up being in the classroom with their child when he was a young parent. He was like 22, and he had a child who needed extra support, his own kid who needed extra support in the classroom. And the school wasn't willing to give it to him. So he sat with his kid every day, quit his job and sat with his kid in the classroom. And that brought him back to his why.
So a lot of personal motivation.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. You and I can talk about this for hours. And so I want to make sure that I open up the floor to our community. Nicole, thank you so much for your insight and for chatting with me today. Okay, so I'm gonna do what my mama told me, and that's to share the floor. So community, I would love to invite you all to come off mute, you know, share a question that you may have with Nicole, or you can put it in the chat, whatever feels most comfortable for you.
I'll go ahead and share or ask a question. In your research, did you find, and I'll preface it by saying what I found in the early childhood space, because I came from the K-12 space, that when you come in as the leader and you want to be transformational or visionary, there are so many compliances that are required in early childhood that you find yourself getting stuck at the level of just maintaining compliance and not being able to move beyond move to the capacity building and creating a transformational school or a transformational program, because I have like 24 schools that I'm responsible for. So that kind of makes me want to feel like leaving the profession, because I don't have a lot of other men to lean on who are in the same situation. Luckily, I found this group and I've gotten support from this group, but just in the early childhood space, the state and federal requirements kind of prohibit you a lot of times from wanting to be transformational in creating a vision and leading people in a new direction, because it's hard for them to just move beyond compliance. And so that becomes lonely at some point when that's what you're doing consistently.
Yeah, I did have participants talk about that element of loneliness, and that's where they talked about needing to find community outside. I mentioned this shortly, outside of their current childhood settings. So one of the guys, he had reached out to, I think, the school where he got his degree from, and asked them to connect him with other men of color who were in the early childhood setting. And so they had to get innovative in order to find that community. I think ECLOC has been an answer. It's like an answer to that lack of community, in a sense, in that way. And so the participants did talk about loneliness a lot. I think as an educator, and my hope as a person who's thinking about policy, who's thinking about innovation in these settings, my hope is that that doesn't have to happen on the individual's end, that these organizations or different entities who are bringing in potential early childhood candidates have different ways to innovate access in ways that they wouldn't normally have. So whether that's comping training, helping them meet all of these requirements to be an early childhood educator, to maintain those compliance, versus just saying like, oh, if you don't have it, you can't be here, figuring out alternative ways to support compliance measures like that. So that's my hope, that people would embrace innovation, because it can happen. We do it for all sorts of things. We make things happen everywhere when we want it to happen. Yeah, I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions from our community members?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I had a question. You mentioned belonging and how belonging was a factor in this research. I'm curious about the ways in which you measured belonging, and specifically if you had some, quantitative approaches to measuring belonging.
So I did not do quantitative. This was strictly a qualitative study. So I did not, in this sense, for this study, do quantitative. I do plan on doing some follow-up around the quantitative measurements of belonging. So what I did was, within the research questions, those were categorized by their experiences. So experiences in teaching, experiences in their early childhood settings, and then there were some questions around what specific vocabulary meant to them, like the word belonging. What does that mean to them? What did it feel like for them to belong as a child? And then what did it feel like them to exude belonging in their community? And so that's how we navigated that conversation when belonging came up. But I didn't have any quantitative elements other than tallying their amounts of time that they said, I don't feel like I belong. And I leveraged different elements of their stories to categorize dynamics of belonging.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, so one of the things, thank you all. One of the things that we would love to do right now is to spend some time together in small groups to kind of like reflect on what Nicole has shared. And so before I'm gonna pass it on to turn it over to Grant, and Grant, you will introduce the next section. Nicole, thank you so much for sharing your research with us, for sharing your work, sharing space. And I am really excited about what your study really means for us in the space, and what we can do to kind of shift our own, make some changes with, in our circle of influence within our organizations and communities, and also thinking about, policy implications. So thank you. Grant, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rasma. Thank you, Nicole. We're going to have the chance for some closing thoughts from Nicole at the end of this, but I would love for us to just share a little gratitude. So if you can jump in the chat or jump off of mute, would love for us to show a little gratitude for our fireside chat. For the interactive portion of our event, we're going to be doing an experience that is building off of this me, we, us framework. So in a moment, we're going to open up some breakout rooms, and you'll actually join a small group. And then you're going to find your tab in this Jamboard that's going to be based on the color of your breakout group. So you may be green, red, or yellow. And then based on your color, and in that small group, we're actually going to do some self-reflection and some group reflection. So when we initially join that small group, we're going to start with doing some self-reflection with the me, which is, what am I already doing? What might I keep doing or start doing? What thoughts, feelings, or reactions do I have from the conversation so far? Then once we have the chance to do introductions, you'll share out what came up for you in the me portion. We'll jump to we, where we talk about opportunities that exist to put these learnings into practice. So for this section, we'll ask you to kind of take on the hat of some of the teams and communities that you represent, and actually think from that, okay, what ways might we be able to actually put these learnings into practice? And then we'll close out in that small group and come back into whole group to talk about some collective action and how can policy and systems be supportive of Black men. So in just a moment, I'm going to open up these breakout rooms. Your room is going to correspond with the color, or your room is going to have a color that's in the name, and that color will correspond with the Jamboard that your breakout room will use. Can I ask for some thumbs, a thumb straight up if you're feeling clear, halfway, or down if you need a little bit more information? Okay. If you're in the middle, you're going to have a facilitator in that room with you that's going to be able to support you and set you up for success. So they're going to kick off the breakout room once you get in there and reiterate those instructions for how to get started with the self-reflection. I love all this gratitude seen in the chat. Shout out to you, Nicole. So with that, we're going to open up these breakout rooms. All right. So those rooms are now open. You can go ahead and navigate to the breakout room you've been assigned. And once you're in that breakout room, we'll get started. I'll drop this in the chat as well, so everybody can open this up.
Grant, share that question one more time, please.
Yes. The question is, what opportunities do you see for policy and systems to be more supportive of Black men? What collective actions can we take or advocate for as a group? Opportunities to elevate some of the conversations we had in a small group for this whole group space. That might be actions that we take forth.
I don't have as much in the way of policy changes. I tend to lean more towards hearts and minds work. And so one of the things that I really love the way Erasma framed it, lifting up the stories. We may have a very small selection of stories of Black men in this space, but let's put as much as we can to lift up the imagery and the stories of the Black men that we do have in this space, so that they can become images and stories that people can see themselves in. And I think in showing that representation, we perhaps can ignite the curiosity of those people who love kids. I know, that there are Black men out here who really do. They're just wonderful with kids, and they may just not have seen enough images of themselves with kids, like they might see images of themselves with a basketball, or images of themselves in a suit, or images of themselves with a construction hat. And so making that image something that's more publicly seen, and making those stories things that are much more in circulation, could increase the number of people who can imagine themselves in those spaces. And I think imagination is the first step towards actualization for us.
Love that, Eb.
One thing I'm thinking about around policy specifically is around we are experiencing the unfortunate realities around funding. We kind of talked about this in our breakout around how funding cannot be targeted in that way. Right now, we're seeing many of our friends and sisters and brothers in that state right now, and so thinking about how do we get ourselves into those seats, and how do we find advocates who are already in those seats and have access to writing policies around funding, to writing in opportunities, because it is costly to be an early childhood educator. Even though we don't get compensated much, it costs a lot from our time and our energy. And so just thinking around what are those different organizations and policies that we can enact that can take some of that weight off.
Thanks for mentioning that, Nicole, because we had a moment in our breakout where Michelle was about to talk me back into the classroom, and it's easy
Both
to
of us.
it's easy to remember the joy, but those costs you got to forget about real quick. So thanks for naming that.
I'm curious, what was the pitch?
What was the pitch, Michelle? How did you share it?
Well, I was I don't know. I just like thinking back to, I shared like thinking back to my Head Start years when we had, you know, some Black male staff in the class, in the centers. It was like, it's just a vibe, right? You know, and it kind of levels at that energy in the building. Everybody knew Mr. Toy. He was, you know, it was just, it was a pure joy, and we need more of that. And then I don't know, I was like, y'all, I'm kind of questioning myself, you know, am I in the right career? Do I need to go back to the classroom too? So I don't know. But also, one thing that I shared as well is just like, when we have Black students who have these disciplinary actions, it's not always disciplinary, right? Behavior has meaning. And so when you have someone that looks like you and has some of those cultural similarities, then, you know, like, we get it. We know, oh, come here. He just, or she just, you know, and then the situation is diffused. Yeah, it's, I don't know how the young kids say, you either get it or you don't, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you have something really valuable there in terms of how that, at the risk of maybe not being the most appropriate for the time, but I think there's something to being able to have masculine energy in a space, especially like you said, to balance out some of the other energies in the space, and to be able to perhaps market or communicate the value to men of fatherhood, because I know, especially within the Black community, there's data to support that, you know, Black men are some of the most active in their children's lives. But there's also this narrative that, you know, Black men are also some of the most absent. And at least in the rooms that I've been in with Black men who've gotten into education, there's just the prevalence of fatherlessness as a part of their narrative for what motivated them to be in that space. Literally, men saying, you know, I wanted to be that thing that I needed. I think there's an untapped potential in us being able to communicate the opportunity for men to provide that to the next generation of little boys and little girls. And perhaps being able to communicate along those lines could, you know, invigorate more interest. I don't know how you say, well, these are kids that you get to give back. and that's a big plus. But I feel like there's an opportunity for us to tap into the desire for that kind of experience for for kids, and to be able to tell somebody that they're serving in this, you know, societal way that really can't be replicated or replaced. And they might know that for themselves in their own lives. You know, so I wonder about that myself.
One thing that I'm thinking about, even like in my own household, my sister and my brother-in-law live with us. And so when something is happening with my son, I can talk to him all day. My sister can talk to him all day, but get his uncle and his dad in the room, and there's just this different level of connection, communication, accountability in a loving way that holds him, that draws him in a different way. And I don't know if it's just because he's seeing someone who looks like him, he's seeing someone who processes emotions more closely to the way he does, or who has to like exerts the emotions and feelings he has closer to the way that he does. But I'm just thinking about the power that comes within that opportunity for kids in spaces where they're often shut down because they don't have the opportunity to do so. Because I tap out all the time and I'm like, go talk to Uncle Demo, you know? And so just having that access, I think, inside of our school settings, early classrooms, from the smallest of them when they're falling and Uncle is picking them up and hugging them in a jovial way, rather than a like caressing, a like poor baby way. Kind of just, I'm just thinking about all of the things. Sorry, my brain is all over the place, but it's just causing me to like have some little firing synopsis in my brain.
Can I add a different perspective? And I totally agree with it, what everybody has said. But from a practitioner standpoint, I guess I've been in practitioner mode for so many years, being a principal and an assistant principal, and operating that way and trying to individualize the relationship with every child and knowing their need and meeting their needs. Then there are those people in that setting who don't look like me, who think that you should be punitive toward children. And when you're not always punitive, then that's kind of what hinders you professionally from growing or making it to the next level, because you kind of get a reputation as being soft, or being soft on discipline and soft on kids, and people in some spaces want you to be as hard as possible on children.
I have a question, Kelvin. Do they see that punitive, or being punitive equals accountability, or is it like, is there a way to be hold accountability higher than the being punitive? Or is that like a mindset?
I think
Is
it's
that
a
an atmosphere mindset? Okay.
It's a mindset, particularly for classroom teachers who have been doing this for a long time, particularly when I worked at the middle school and high school level. You should not deviate from the student handbook. If the student handbook says you get 3 days for walking out of my class, regardless of whether that child had to go to the restroom like right away, and you understand as a man, when you have to use the bathroom, you have to use the bathroom. There should be consequences and there should be accountability, but it doesn't have to be the most stringent thing every time. But sometimes teachers see that it needs to be the most stringent consequence every time. And when you don't do that, then it causes, reputational issues for that administrator or for that person. Not that you're trying to be soft on the kids and not hold them accountable, but you understand what they're going through and maybe what caused them to act that way, particularly if they don't see teachers. I work in a setting where there was 95% people who didn't look like me, and I did it for 7 years. So that was really, really hard, but I was there because there were children who looked like me. So that's why I was selected.
Kelvin, one of the themes we were sort of talking about and circling around is how having more Black men or other men of color in educational settings can sometimes carry a level of pressure to perform and or has this like doubleized effect of like both I am representing Blackness in this community, you know, like there's just like a pressure to perform. And it just makes me wonder a lot about the going back to your initial point, Nicole, on environments that create a sense of belonging for folks to really embody their Blackness in that space and to be able to express that an extension of my Blackness is being able to interpret what is happening in this classroom and relate back to children. And like, what are the systems changes that it would take to create whole school settings where that is welcome, as opposed to the biases around an interpretation of a single teacher or single administrator's actions as being X, Y, and Z thing. And so it's just like, I feel like it's like really bringing it full circle for me.
Yeah, and I think at some point when children have those expectations and they're so harsh that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, you think this is who I am, so this is who I'm going to become, and this is what I'm going to do. So we failed them in that aspect.
Right, y'all. I'm going to move us forward and into the final moments of our event. Thank you for contributing to this discussion. This has been a really interesting one. I'm going to pass it over to Nicole to give us some closing thoughts and some final words, just based on how this conversation is landing with you, and if you might make any final plugs for perspectives, resources. Yeah, final perspective.
I appreciate y'all giving me the platform to talk about this. It is definitely was a passion project of mine, research for the past 4.5 years. And so I'm happy to talk about it anytime that I get the opportunity to talk about it. My goal with this is really that people begin to ideate around ways and you leverage their genius to innovate opportunities beyond the data. I think there's lots of research that I ran into around this. People have been talking about this for years. And there are different pockets of ideation and innovation, like My Brother's Keeper, things of that sort around this opportunity. But really, there's so many other things that we've taken a concept, taken a problem, and we've moved towards action on. And I would really, really love for people to bring this to the forefront and figure out what is within their scope of influence to innovate around and implement. So that's my call to action for y'all. If y'all want to connect, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. Y'all know how to find me on the ECLOC platform. And that's it. Yeah.
Thank you again so much, Nicole, for being here, for sharing your work, for everyone, for also lending your voices and your thoughts to this space. I know this is a layered conversation that we could continue to have for hours in terms of really pulling this apart and getting into the weeds and the nuances of the conversation. So I encourage us to continue in our own spaces and ways to continue to dig into the meat of this, into the heart of this, as we think about how we look for ways forward in our own spaces and in our own work. With that final thank you, also want to share that this is a series. We have the privilege of having Nicole be our very first speaker spotlight. Upcoming, just previewing, July 18th, more info will go about this. We'll be welcoming excuse me, stumbling over my words, Dr. Danielle Thorpe as our July speaker, whose research focuses on thinking about how neighborhood factors impact parenting choices and by extension, development of young children, both at the resource and community level, but also at the individual parent level as well, and how those things work together to impact parenting and youth development. And so we'll be welcoming her on July 18th. And they will also have an August speaker in the works as well. So please look out for those and join us for the remainder of the series. That being said, thank you all again for spending this time with us. We hope that you are safe and well. And we'll be sure to share the recording and any additional resources out after the session.
Thank you all.
Thanks for hanging by, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome. Bye.